Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, today we're going to continue on talking about fabricated narrations now. Right, so, fabricated narrations, like I said to you last week, these are something which are very dangerous and are dangerous because they are directly affecting the source of Sharia. Okay, so do you want to put that heating a bit down? It's going to full blast. So, the next things now. So, last lesson we mentioned about people who belong to certain political parties. So, today we're going to be talking about another point, which is this is point number 2, which is A'da al-Islam. Okay, so A'da al-Islam. Okay, so A'da al-Islam basically means people who have an enmity towards Islam. Yeah, so people who have an enmity towards Islam obviously might have some sort of agenda. They want to infiltrate the Muslims. They want to change narrations for themselves or to cause the Muslims more harm. So anyway, one of the examples that's given is that one day a Jewish person came to one of the scholars and he mentioned about Islam. So this guy, he was apparently a scholar, but obviously he was fabricating. So he said, this Jewish man said to this man, who holds up the throne, the arsh? So he asked the question about the arsh. Who is holding up the arsh? The arsh of Allah. So the man quoted a hadith. And so the man said this. He said that the arsh, I'll write it in Arabic, تحمله الهوام بقرونها والمجرة التي في السماء من عرقهم. So in other words, what happened was, he said, the Prophet ﷺ said, this is obviously a lie made up, that there's animals that are holding up the arsh with their horns. So when they heard this, they said, we accept Islam. So this is a fabricated narration, totally made up. It is not true at all. And the reason that it's not true is because we know the Quran mentions that the angels, there's 8 angels that are holding up the arsh of Allah. Yeah, and so how can this be true? So these are kind of fabricated narrations that are taken from other religions, and people believe that this must also be the belief in Islam as well. Yeah, so this is why it's very important for people to understand the valid narrations, authentic sources before they ever attribute anything to Islam. Okay, there was a man as well. His name was Abdul Karim ibn Abi al-Awja. So Abdul Karim ibn Abi al-Awja, this was a person who deliberately fabricated narrations, made up narrations and started spreading them amongst people. And when they caught him, the authorities caught him and they were about to give him capital punishment, he said, before they were about to give it to him, he said, I've spread 4,000 false narrations amongst the Muslims, making some things haram, making some things halal. So when the people heard this, they got scared. Now, because our sources are going to be discredited now. So one of the scholars stood up and he said, so long as amongst us are experts, so long as amongst us are the experts of scholars, they'll find every single narration of yours, they'll find it and they'll pick it out. Yeah, they'll pick it out. So this was something that people were doing in the beginning as well. Yeah, they were, because of enmity towards Islam, they were adding things, they were changing things in Islam. Alhamdulillah, the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that in every era there's going to be scholars who will be monitoring the deen, yeah, who will be stopping those who make any alterations to the deen from making alterations. Okay, so there's a hadith to that meaning. Anyway, so that's number 2. Next. So bigger. Okay, so number 3. The third reason for why people were fabricating narrations was because of racism. Yeah, so there was racism, unfortunately, in the past, and it still exists today. So because of people of their own racism, they began to invent these. And this started to occur in this era. It started to occur in the 200s. Yeah, so roughly in this era, racism started to spread. So in other words, people were boasting about their own community, their own tribes, their own color. So they began to invent certain, so for example, like Persian people, some of them, they came up with this kind of hadith. They said that كلام الذين حول العرش بالفارسية, the speech of those people who are around the arsh of Allah is Persian. Yeah, so where did they get that from? Where is that? So there's no authentic narration to prove that. So they made it up. And you can only know something about the hereafter or about what's happening in the arsh through Allah and His Messenger. Yeah, there's no other way you can know this. And some people, in response, they said some narration like this: أبغض الكلام إلى الله الفارسية, the most hated speech by Allah is Persian. Yeah, so some people made that up. Obviously, if you attribute something and you say this is the most despised thing by Allah, then that means that you're attributing to Allah His Messenger, because there's no other way you could have known this. So racism was another factor. Okay, next. Number 4. Al-Qassas. So Al-Qassas, storytellers. So storytellers is what today we call films, basically. So every tribe used to have people who were good at telling stories, like theatre, films. Yeah, so people used to gather around them, they used to tell stories, give talks. And so a lot of these people used to give talks. To impress people, they used to come up with new hadith that no one's heard before. Yeah, so people like that kind of stuff. They don't like old things. So you tell them something new, then they get interested in it as well. So one day, there was a man, and he stood up to give a talk. and he began to quote a hadith. So the hadith that he began to quote was like this. He said, Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya bin Ma'in both told me that Abdul Razak told them, that Ma'mar told them, that Qatada told them, that Anas radiallahu anhu said that قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and then he quotes the hadith. Yeah. So the hadith is quite long. I'm just going to write a short part of it. خلق الله من قال لا إله إلا الله خلق الله من كل كلمة طيرا منقاره من ذهب وريشه من marjan, and the hadith goes on very long. So anyway, he says this. Okay, he says, Imam Ahmad and Imam Yahya both told me that Abdul Razak told them, that Ma'mar told them, Qatada told them, that Anas told him that the Prophet ﷺ said. The hadith basically is this. He said, whoever says La ilaha illallah, you know this kalima, Allah will create from every single word that he said. Yeah, from every single word, Allah will create a bird. This bird will have a gold beak, and its feathers will be made from precious stones, rubies, marjan, and it will have 70,000 tongues, and every 70,000 tongues will speak 70 tongues, and every tongue will have 70 languages, and it will be praising Allah, and it goes on and on. Yeah, so it's made up narration to impress people. So in the crowd on that day, Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in were sitting there. So after he finished his long talk and impressed all the people, and he mentioned this big virtue of saying the kalima la ilaha illallah, so what happened was people began to give him money. Yeah, people began to give him money, like beggars. So began to collect money from everyone. So Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in came, and he thought that they've come also to give money. He didn't know who they were. So he said, what do you guys want to give money? He said, come on. So they said, wait a minute. He said, you quoted this hadith, and he said, Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in told you this hadith. And Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in were the most knowledgeable people of hadith at that time. So they said, we never ever narrated this hadith, and we can't even remember telling you something like this. So the man got caught. So he said that I heard that Ahmad and Yahya were dumb, but now I've realized it. Is there only one Ahmad ibn Hanbal in the world? Is there only one Yahya ibn Ma'in in the world? Yeah, so in other words, he even tried to get himself out of that as well. So this is why there are people in the past who, to impress people, they come out with strange narrations. And you got to be careful sometimes of people who give talks. Yeah, people who give talks, on YouTube or on here or there, you hear. Some of them, they don't research their information, and they'll just mention something, quote something which is totally fabricated, not mentioned in Islam or in the authentic sources, and and that might cause people to have the wrong understanding of Islam. You understand that? So this is qassas, storytellers. Okay, next. Number 5. Okay, so number 5 is people who wanted to encourage people. So people who wanted to encourage others. So they wanted to encourage them maybe to do good or encourage them to stay away from evil. So they began to make stuff up. So for example, like, sometimes parents, they want to scare their children and they don't want them to stay up late. So they make something up. Those children who go to sleep after 10 o'clock, what happens to them on the Day of Judgment? Yeah, this happens to them. Or for example, like the mother wants the child to have breakfast, so she might make something up. A child who has their breakfast, then Allah Ta'ala on the Day of Judgment is going to give that person this much. So the child quickly starts eating breakfast. So these kind of things people used to do. Yeah, so this is very common. This is very common. You'll find it in virtues, Fada'il as-Suwar, virtues of surahs of the Quran. So a lot of the virtues of particular surahs, whoever reads this surah gets this much reward, whoever reads this verse gets this much reward. Before you go to sleep, write down Alif Lam Mim on your hand and you have good dreams. Yeah, these kind of stuff people make up. They fabricate it, a lot of them are. Yeah, so you got to be careful of those kind of things. So one is, for example, like someone, they experienced it. This is known as mujarrabat. Mujarrabat is allowed. Yeah, mujarrabat basically means that, let's say for example, you experience that every time you read Qul hu Allahu ahad before you go to sleep, then you have good dreams. You experienced it. And you went to your friend and you told your friend, every time I read Qul hu Allahu ahad when I go to sleep, I have good dreams. So they started to do it. And then they pass it on to other people. Do you understand? That's allowed, that is. Yeah. And scholars in the past, many of them have reported these kind of similar things. So as long as you don't attribute it to Prophet ﷺ, you're okay. If it's through your own experience, then so like for example, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he used to say that whenever someone used to ask me a question, before answering it, I would read Surah Al-Fatiha. And then Allah would open up the answer to me. So he doesn't attribute to the Prophet ﷺ, then it's fine. Does that make sense? Yeah, so this is why these kind of things, so people attribute to the Prophet ﷺ. So this is wrong, this is fabricated. You can't attribute something which the Prophet ﷺ did not say or did not do. Otherwise, this is causing a danger to our tradition. Okay, so a lot of these you get in Fada'il as-Suwar, and you just got to be careful when you read some tafsirs. You get some of these made up things in there. And if you read tafsirs like Tafsir Ibn Kathir, in Tafsir Ibn Kathir, he deals with these kind of made up narrations. So he'll talk about them and he'll discuss why they're wrong, fabricated narrations. You wrong with that? Okay, so people that make these kind of stuff up, if a woman doesn't wear a scarf on the head, shaitan comes and urinates on her head. Yeah, so I don't know where did they get that from. Like the Prophet ﷺ never said it. So these kind of things are things that are made up by people, and then it sounds really good and it sounds good at like stopping people from doing bad. And some people even said this. They said, what's wrong with it if we're encouraging people to go for salat, or we're encouraging people to do hijab, or we're encouraging people to, stay away from haram? Isn't it a good thing, even if we make it up? So no, scholars said no, absolutely not. Yeah, you cannot fight fire with fire like that. So if someone is doing wrong, you can't make up something to tell them not to do it. There's enough evidences, there's enough narrations for us to be able to use those authentic ones, then to resort to we can even use da'if ones like we said before. Yeah, there's loads of even da'if narrations that we can use, but you can't go to fabricate it, make made up false. Yeah, so they got there's like loads of some people say, if you open the Quran, read the Quran, and you leave it open, shaitan comes to read from the Quran. Yeah, if you pray on a prayer mat and you don't fold the other edge, shaitan comes and he prays on there. So it's good, let shaitan pray. Yeah, he's got nothing else to do. He messes everyone else's life up. You mess his life up. Yeah. So, and if he's got nowhere else to urinate, then, that's fine. So these kind of things, people should stay away from and be very careful about these kind of narrations. Now, this is why it's not advisable for the lay person who doesn't really have any training in Arabic or in Usool Hadith or anything like that, to read these kind of books. Because without knowing, a person might read this book, not know what if it's authentic or not, and then, have a wrong understanding of the deen. Okay, next. Okay, so number 6. So number 6 is al-khilafiyat al-madhhabiyya. Al-khilafiyat al-madhhabiyya. The difference of opinions in fiqh. The difference of opinions in fiqh. Okay, so difference of opinions in fiqh is fine, it's acceptable. There were differences of opinions amongst the Sahaba, that's fine, but you're not allowed to make up narrations to support your madhab. Yeah, so you can't make up narrations. So for example, like in the past, people made up narrations like this. They said, Man rafa'a yadayhi fi ruku' fala salata lahu. Whoever raises their hands in ruku', there's raful yadain, their salat has become invalid. Yeah, so this is, maybe it was a statement of a particular scholar, but then someone came along and said, oh, the Prophet ﷺ said this. Everyone understand that? So you can't do that, because again, you can't make up stuff. Even if it's to support your own school of thought, you can't make stuff up. Okay, anyway, and last one, number 7. Number 7 is التقرب إلى الحكام. التقرب إلى الحكام. So some people, to get close to leaders, they used to make up narrations to impress them. Yeah, to get close to narrations. So for example, like on one occasion, there was a leader, a Khalifa, and someone there was a guy who wanted to impress him. So he came in and he quoted a hadith. And the hadith goes like this. لا سبق إلا في نصل أو خف أو حافر. There is no racing. Racing is not allowed except in nasl or khuf or hafir. In other words, racing is not allowed except in these kind of animals. In other words, animals that have hooves, animals that have shoes, like that. So you can race your horses, you can race your camels to train them. It's allowed. So what happened was, this king or this Khalifa, he used to like birds. So what this guy done, he added in the hadith and he said, oh, janahin. He added that in. Or in wings. In other words, or in birds. You're allowed to race birds. So just to impress the leader, he edited the hadith. So when the leader found out that he's doing this, he got angry at him. He said, just to impress me, you're going to add a hadith. You're going to make up a hadith. So he told him off. Okay, so sometimes people will do this. They'll say this about certain leaders. Yeah, they'll say like, this person is, the Prophet ﷺ spoke about you in a hadith. Yeah, just to impress him. And then once you impress the Khalifa, the leader, he's obviously going to start spending on you, give you money, give you stuff. Okay, so these were some of the reasons, and there's more reasons, but these were some of the seven causes of people inventing narrations. But alhamdulillah, the scholars were very particular, were very precise, yeah, and they scanned through all the narrations, and they were able to find all the fabricated, like a virus scanner that you have on your computer or on your phone. So any sort of virus that comes, any sort of malware that comes, any sort of anything fake that's trying to get into your computer, the virus will kill it and will quarantine it. So like that, the scholars were able to do that. So anyway, what's the ruling now? What's the hukum? Okay, what's the hukum of fabricated narrations? Yeah, so first of all, we know the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith, yeah, that man kadhaba alayya muta'ammidan. We know that narration. Whoever attributes a lie to me deliberately, let him take his place in the fire of Jahannam. Yeah? Okay. And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Man haddatha anni bihadithin yara annahu kadhib fahuwa ahad al-kadhibina or kadhibaini. Yeah, so whoever narrates from me a hadith and he believes that hadith is a lie. So let's say someone tells you a hadith and you really believe this is a lie, it's not true, but then you still go and you tell someone else this hadith. Yeah, you go and you tell someone else this hadith, then you are counted as one of the liars. Yeah, because why did you go and forward it if you were not sure? Yeah, so this is why you should not go around forwarding narrations if you do not know whether it's authentic or not, like I told you before. Because you might just think, even if it says Bukhari on there, even if it says Muslim on there, the person might be lying. Yeah, they falsely write down Bukhari just for people to accept it. They falsely write down Muslim for people to accept it. Everyone understand? Yeah, so this is why you are absolutely not allowed to go and tell other people. The only time when you're allowed to tell other people is if you want to make them aware that this hadith exists. You have to tell them. Yeah, you have to tell them, guys, there's this hadith that man said that whoever says La ilaha illallah, from every single word Allah will make a bird and this, etc, etc, etc. And then you tell them, look, this is a fabricated narration, it was made up. So you have to make it clear to them that it's made up. Everyone understand? Okay, so this is why fabricated narrations, even if you are unsure if it's fabricated, you should not go and forward it to anyone. Best thing not to forward any hadith. Yeah, you can forward advice to people. You can forward words of advice or sayings of scholars, it's fine. But do not go and forward hadith, because you might be forwarding something that's wrong or even translated wrong. And even translated wrong might come under lying. Yeah, because the hadith says one thing, but the guy translates it as something else. He's attributing a lie to the Prophet ﷺ. So you don't want that to happen as well. Everyone